The true history of black people in America. Learning incomplete truths and patriotic falsehoods is a common element of studying American history. Across the country, textbooks and curriculum continue to emphasize the white experience, with black people frequently relegated to a brief section about slavery and Martin Luther King Jr. passages. Many students leave high school history class, and the rest of their lives, with a profound lack of knowledge of the history and perspectives of black people in America. Last summer, the New York Times 1619 Project sparked a long overdue debate about how African American tales should be told through the eyes of African Americans. In keeping with tradition, and in honor of Black History Month, Vox enlisted the help of 6 black professors and historians to debunk some of the most common fallacies about black history. Understanding black history is about more than learning about the cruelty and injustice that African Americans have faced. It's about how they have battled to live and prosper in America. Before we start the video, please subscribe my YouTube channel so that you can be updated by my new videos. Some of the myths we get to know are described by us in the video. Number 1. Enslaved people didn't have money. Many, though, had money. People who were enslaved took part in both the informal and formal market economies. They put money aside from overwork, self-employment, and independent economic operations with banks, local merchants, and their enslavers. Elizabeth Keckley, a talented seamstress whose gowns for Abraham Lincoln's wife are on exhibit in Smithsonian museums, fed her enslaver's entire family while still earning enough money to pay for her release. Local marketplaces, especially those in Savannah and Charleston, were dominated by free and enslaved market women, who controlled networks that crisscrossed the countryside. They guaranteed that marketplaces had fresh fruits, vegetables, and eggs, as well as a regular supply of cash to enslaved people. These women were regarded as loose and disorderly by whites who criticized their acts as inappropriate for women, but white people of all classes relied on them for survival. Hundreds of thousands of black people sought safety behind Union lines during the Civil War's turmoil. The majority were poor, but a few were able to bring wealth secreted under beds, in private chests, and other hidden locations with them. After the war, black people campaigned for the restitution of the money that Union and Confederate soldiers had seized or outright stolen through the Southern Claims Commission. Number 2. Black Revolutionary soldiers were patriots. Much has been written about how colonial black Americans fought during the American Revolution, some free and some enslaved. Black patriots are a term used to describe black revolutionary soldiers. However, within revolutionary rhetoric, the title patriot is reserved for those from the 13 colonies who believed in the concepts contained in the Declaration of Independence, namely, that America should be an independent country free of Britain. These individuals were willing to fight for this cause, join the Continental Army, and are eternally regarded patriots as a result of their sacrifice. That is why the phrase, "black patriot," is a myth. It implies that both black and white revolutionary troops fought for the same cause. To begin with, black revolutionary warriors did not fight for a country that enslaved and mistreated them out of love. Not for America, but for themselves and the race as a whole, black revolutionary fighters fought for freedom. The American Revolution, in fact, is a textbook example of interest convergence. Interest convergence means that any progress for black people in racial states like the 13 colonies can only be made if it also benefits the dominant culture, in this example, the emancipation of America's white colonists. In other words, colonists enlisted black people not because of some moral obligation, but because they needed manpower to win the war. Number 3. Black men were injected with syphilis in the Tuskegee experiment. The assumption that the government injected 600 black males in Macon County, Alabama, with syphilis is a harmful myth that continues to torment black Americans. This myth has instilled a healthy suspicion in the American medical profession in generations of African Americans. While these men were not given syphilis, their narrative reveals an important truth. America's medical history is rife with racism, dread, and the exploitation of black bodies. The Tuskegee study of untreated syphilis in the Negro male grew out of a research group established in 1932 by the U.S. Public Health Service's Venereal Disease Unit. The experiment was done at what is now Tuskegee University, a historically black university in Macon County, Alabama, to see how untreated syphilis affected people. free medical examinations, hot meals, free treatment for minor injuries, rides to and from the hospital, and guaranteed burial stipends, up to $50, were all offered to these illiterate and underprivileged sharecroppers. The project was also not conducted in complete secrecy, and it enlisted the help of some African American health personnel and educators affiliated with the Tuskegee Institute. Number 4. Black people in early Jim Crow America didn't fight back. In Jim Crow America, African Americans were constantly threatened by ritualistic public murders by white mobs, unpunished individual attacks, and police violence. However, there is a persistent myth about how they dealt with it. Some black people used logical pleas to convince police and civic authorities that their rights and lives should be safeguarded in an attempt to discover legal means to handle such situations. However, the crushing weight of an adversarial criminal justice system and the rigidity of the color line often drowned out those appeals, leaving black people susceptible to further mistreatment and murder. In the face of this brutality, some African Americans physically and psychologically prepared themselves for the assault they expected, and they fought back. A generation born after World War I strove to protect themselves in the only ways left. They were urban, more educated than their parents, and often trained military. Many people believed, as Marcus Garvey famously told a Harlem crowd, that prayer for freedom would never bring them independence. Number 5. Crack in the ghetto was the largest drug crisis of the 1980s. In the United States, the bodies of people of color have a long history of utter exploitation and criminality. Total exploitation, like total war, enlists and mobilizes the resources of mainstream society to annihilate the vulnerable's resources and infrastructure. This has been done to black people by a powerful prison industrial complex that profits from their demonization, incarceration, disenfranchisement, and exclusion. And the late 80s and early 90s crack pandemic is a perfect example of this cycle. Despite the fact that in a 1991 National Institute on Drug Abuse survey, white people reported using crack more than black people, black individuals were punished for crack charges 8 times more than whites. Meanwhile, a cocaine epidemic erupted in white suburbia and college campuses, prompting the United States to impose tougher crack punishments than cocaine. Before federal mandatory minimum sentencing for crack cocaine charges was enacted in 1986, the average federal drug sentence for African Americans was 11% greater than for whites. Number 6. All black people were enslaved until emancipation. One of the most common misconceptions regarding African American history in America is that they were all enslaved until the Emancipation Proclamation, or Juneteenth Day. Free black and black-white biracial societies occurred long before slavery in areas like Louisiana, Maryland, Virginia, and Ohio. Anthony Johnson, who was known as Antonio the Negro in the 1625 census, was mentioned as a servant on this document. He and his wife owned and managed a big piece of land in Virginia by 1640. Some enslaved Africans were able to earn enough money to buy their freedom by selling their labor or craftsmanship to others. Richard Allen, for example, paid for his freedom in 1786 and, less than a decade later, co-founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church. Robert Carter III freed his 100 enslaved Africans after the American Revolutionary War, making him the greatest manumission, or slave freeing, until Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. Slave states eventually enacted expulsion laws, making it illegal for free black people to remain there. Some petitioned to stay near enslaved relatives, while others relocated to the west or north. Many free blacks in the Northeast organized charitable organizations such as the Free African Union Society to provide support and, in some circumstances, repatriation. I hope you find this video helpful. If you liked the video, do like and subscribe as it really helps our channel, and do remember to give your feedback in the comments below. See you in the next video with some more interesting stories and facts.